Today we have the 20-pound meat mixer. Let's go through the steps required to assemble it and get ready for using. First we have the paddle assembly. There's two distinct ends. One end has a round hole. The opposite end has a slot cut in it that will allow the handle to attach to it. So first we're going to take the round end, align it with the smooth pin on this retractable knob. Pulling back on this retractable knob allows the paddle assembly to fit down into the tank. Releasing it will allow the pin to slide into the paddle. Next, you'll see the handle assembly has two flat ends machined on the stub. You're going to make sure that those flats are aligned with the flats on the paddle assembly. Slide it in until it seats and tighten the knob until everything is snug. With the handle secure, you're ready to add your meat to the mixer, add your seasonings, and you can begin mixing. Now that we have the mixer assembled, let's go ahead and take that pork that we ground up earlier, mix it with some bratwurst seasoning, and mix it up. So we're gonna we have about 7 pounds of pork here. Just gonna add that to the mixer. And after grinding this meat, we went ahead and threw it back in the freezer to cool it off. You really wanna make sure that you're keeping the meat cold as you're processing it, just to prevent any bacteria growth, and it really makes the product a lot fresher in the end. Next, we're gonna add our seasoning mixture. We've got enough here for the 7 pounds of meat. We're just gonna dump all that in. And the rule of thumb is you wanna add a little bit of moisture to the product, and this kinda helps the seasoning bind with the meat. You could mix the water with the seasoning prior to putting it in, but since we've got a mechanical mixer here, we're just gonna go ahead and add the water directly to the batch. And rule of thumb is about 1 ounce of water per pound of meat. So we've got about 7 ounces of water here. We're gonna add that to the mixture, put our lid on top, and we're ready to begin mixing. So our goals here are to blend the seasoning really well with the meat. And we're also wanting to mix the meat to a point where it kind of becomes tacky, and that really helps the seasoning bind with the meat, and it's gonna give you the best flavor possible. So that's where the meat mixer really kind of has a big advantage over attempting to hand mix it. It allows you to continuously mix the product until you reach that level of desired tackiness. You can turn the crank both forward and rearward. If you see the meat starting to collect along one side of the paddles or against one wall, then just change directions and continue mixing until you achieve that nice tacky texture. If you notice while you're mixing that it seems like you're really not getting to that tacky state, you can add a little bit more water as needed. So by tacky, what I'm referring to is just the meat wanting to stick to itself. And a good way to test that is to just, pick up a little bit of meat, and if it wants to stick to your fingers and really hold on, that is the tacky state that we're looking for. Another thing to mention, while you're mixing, if you happen to notice a little bit of clicking or some noises in the tank, the meat is pushing the paddle from one side to the other, so you can hear the paddle shift from one side of the mixer to the other. So if you hear any little kind of noises or knocks, perfectly normal. Now, since we only had 7 pounds of meat, this is a great size, our 20-pound mixer. For larger batches, up to say 50 pounds, we've got our other mixer here that couples to our meat grinder, and it has a hand crank, but the true advantage is being able to plug it into the electric grinder and just let it mix on its own. So since we have everything tacky the way we need it, we're gonna go from here to our stuffer, and we're gonna create some bratwurst. Let's take a look at the 15-pound stuffer. You'll see all the components that come in the box here. We're gonna go through them one by one as we put the stuffer together. So one of the first things that you're gonna wanna do is, if it's not already, retract the threaded rod. And you can do that by twisting the shaft on the back or assemble the handle to the shaft in the back using the supplied hex key. We're just gonna go ahead and attach it now. There's a small set screw on the back of the handle. Just snug that down and rotate it counterclockwise to retract the shaft all the way up, high enough that you can fit the cylinder in the stand. We're going to assemble the piston to the threaded rod. This is just done with a threaded connection. You'll see a female threaded component here. So just rotate this until it's snug. It doesn't have to be really tight. So that looks good. Also at this time, be sure that the O-ring is fully seated in the groove on the piston. This is the ring that seals against the sidewalls of the cylinder, so as the piston is riding down, that you don't have meat coming up around the piston instead of coming out the bottom. Next, we're going to place the cylinder into the stand. Again, make sure that the threaded rod is fully retracted. You'll see these tabs on the bottom of the cylinder will locate underneath the corresponding tabs on the stand. We're just gonna slide the cylinder into the stand. It really doesn't have a defined location. It kind of sits in there and the piston will guide it into the correct position as it's run down. We have 3 different size stuffing tubes. We've got the large tube. This one would probably work best for filling meat bags, or if you have a larger casing, maybe you're making a bologna or a summer sausage. We've got a medium tube here. This works well for a casing for maybe a bratwurst or maybe a smaller summer sausage casing. And then finally, the smaller tube works well for maybe snack sticks or some breakfast links. Today, we're gonna go ahead and assemble the medium stuffing tube. The stuffing tube has a flange around the top that seats against a mating feature inside the retaining ring. You just drop it through and the retaining ring threads right onto the front of the cylinder. Screw that down until it's snug. Included with the stuffer are also 2 clamps, so you can attach the base to your tabletop and really help solidify it as you're cranking on that handle. So we're gonna pull it over to the edge, grab one of the clamps, and we're just gonna place it over the flange on the base and clamp it securely to the tabletop. Now that we have everything set up where we want it, we can pull the cylinder out, we can load it with the meat that we've combined with seasoning, and we can start stuffing our sausage. As you're filling the cylinder, you want to eliminate as many air gaps as possible. What you'll find is, as you begin stuffing the casing, any air pockets trapped in there are going to be pushed out along with the sausage, and it'll create bubbles, and it's just kind of difficult to get a nice fill on your casing. Once the cylinder is full, go ahead and flatten out the meat, eliminate any air pockets. We're going to assemble the cylinder to the stand. Make sure that the piston is fully retracted. Slide the cylinder in place. Make sure the tabs on the bottom of the cylinder are beneath the mating tabs on the stand. And then crank the handle so that the piston runs down into the cylinder. Make sure you're watching that rubber O-ring around the top. That sealing ring needs to stay in the groove on the piston. If you see it starting to roll out, you may have to back it off, apply a little lubricant or even a little water to that ring, and then try again. You want to make sure it's fully seated as it goes down. So we're going to be using a natural casing to make these bratwursts today. These cases have been soaking, and that really helps to increase the elasticity of the casing, so it's a little bit more pliable and less susceptible to breakage or having a blowout. We're going to just slide as much of the casing onto the stuffing tube as we can. You don't have to put the entire casing onto the stuffing tube. You can stop at any point, cut it off, and start stuffing the product. Now, using the stuffer can be done with one person, but really it helps if you have a helper so that someone can be manipulating the casing coming out of the stuffing tube while the other person is cranking the handle. I've got Seth here today. He's going to crank the handle while I come down to the stuffing tube. We're going to let the bratwurst come out, and we're just going to coil it on the table. And we're going to stuff the casing a little bit loose so that we can come back and twist our links after the fact. You can also twist links as you go, but I find that it's a little bit easier this way. So let's go ahead and get started. So as the meat starts coming out, I'm going to pinch off the end of the casing, and I'm going to use my other hand. Just add a little bit of pressure to the end of the casing as it comes off the end of the stuffing tube. Again, I don't want to go too tight here. I want to leave enough room so that the casing can be twisted into links when we're done. And I'm just going to coil this up. right here. When you get to the end, just back off the handle a half a crank. That'll stop the meat from flowing. You can push that over to the side. We'll get another casing on the stuffing tube and we'll continue the process. When you get to the end, simply cut off your excess. Now you're ready to twist your links. I can demonstrate on this last piece right here. What I like to do is using the width of your hand to kind of gauge the correct size, and then pinch the casing down a little bit just to narrow it, and then just give it a full twist one way. Move over about a hand's width, pinch it down, and twist that link the opposite way. And by rotating back and forth, you're increasing the twist between each link. Now you can take these, cut them apart. I'd suggest freezing them before attempting to vacuum seal them, or take them straight to the grill and cook them up. So that's our 20-pound meat mixer and our 15-pound stuffer. For more detailed specifications on these two products, as well as a listing of the rest of our products that we offer, visit madewithmeat.com.